Robert, tell me a little bit about your role as president of Third Planet.
Well, Barry, we work on climate change. We're interested in what we must do to reduce greenhouse gases emitted into the environment, and how we conserve resources that we're currently using to produce power. For example, 95% of all electricity in this country comes from fossil fuels and nuclear, not from renewable energy. People don't realize how big a proportion that is, and so we work on that proportion, that 95%, if you will. How do we reduce that carbon footprint?
And are you trying to educate people about that? And how do you do that?
Well, years ago, and we've been doing this for a long time now, we were doing most of our work with the public. We were doing public presentations. We were getting out there and literally educating people about what the climate change issue is all about. What we found over the years, though, is that at the end of the day, we must have action by the political establishment. We must have action by the people who will actually make the changes necessary. And so our work has tended to become a little more focused in that area. We haven't given up on the public awareness. We still do a lot of it, but our major focus is on planning, on development, on working in the development process.
We're standing here at the Loggerhead Marine Life Center, which is a green building, and you were telling me that you would take a look at what the power requirements are here in this building as part of your work. Is that correct?
Yes, that's correct to an extent. Everything begins, of course, with a green building. You have to have green to start off with. Green, in my world, means efficient, energy efficient, and that's where all of your power decisions begin. Once you have an efficient building, you then have to look at how you deliver power, and the interesting and actually the largest component of greenhouse gas emissions is in heating and cooling. Most people don't realize that over half of all the electricity that we use in this country is used for heating and cooling. Well, through technologies that are available today and have been available for a long time, we can actually use the heat of power plants to heat buildings and produce cooling. It sounds counterintuitive, I know, but there's in fact, the greater the heat source, the more cooling we can deliver. Hard to believe. And so, when you then look at how we produce power in throughout the world, actually, we've got half of all energy use, as I've mentioned, is in heating and cooling in buildings, and yet power plants produce twice as much heat as they do electricity, producing electricity. So what we look at is how we might compensate for that extra heating and cooling. How might we use that heat from the power plants to provide the heating and cooling? And we're not trying to invent the future here. They've been doing this for decades. For example, Denmark. In Denmark, they have not increased their greenhouse gas emissions since 1976. And yet their economy has grown 14%, but they have not increased their greenhouse gas emissions. How is that possible? It's through what I'm talking about here. They utilize that heat from the power plants to create heat and cooling that they then deliver to the communities.
Can you tell me a couple other examples, maybe here in the United States, that people can see for themselves?
Well, I think the greatest example is to be found at the University of Texas and their campus. This is a very good application for university campuses. We've been doing it for years, for decades, literally. University of Texas is probably further ahead than actually in any other university in the world, and they've recently won the International Energy Agency's award for what we call district heating and cooling. That would be the best example, and there are several others. There's, you could take the city of Rochester up in New York. Rochester is taking lake water from deep lake water, bringing it ashore and using that for cooling of buildings in the city of Rochester. So we're not having to burn any additional fuels to provide cooling in Rochester, for example. And we can do the same here. We can literally tap into the ocean out here offshore and bring that water in and provide cooling.
Switching to the political arena, you
Right.
just came back from a big meeting, quote unquote,
Right.
in Copenhagen,
Right.
the climate change meeting. Can you tell us a little bit about that meeting and what might have or might not have been accomplished?